Welcome to the Homeschool Show with NCHE. Our goal is to help you homeschool with confidence and joy. I'm your host, Matthew McDill. Today is June 17th, 2024. Today in Homeschool News, we're going to ask a question. Would more state control over homeschooling reduce child abuse, neglect, and murder? This is a big question. It's going to be addressed by a research report by Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute. In Homeschool Conversations, I'm going to share a little discussion I had with Jared Dodd at our Thrive convention this year, conference this year, and he was one of our speakers. And then in Homeschool Helps with Amanda's going to share with us her story, the story of her homeschool journey. So that's going to be inspiring as well. Okay, let's jump right into homeschool news, and we're going to be looking at this report from Dr. Brian Ray from the National Home Education Research Institute. Once again, the title is, Would More State Control Over Homeschooling Reduce Child Abuse, Neglect, and Murder? And I'd just like to read through most of this report with you. This came out June 6th of this year. Here's the context. Various news and opinion media outlets occasionally claim that more government control or regulation over private homeschooling would reduce the amount of child abuse, neglect, and murder, or fatalities, that occur in the United States. There are also scholars who claim that the civil government should do more to control homeschooling, and that this would reduce the occurrence of abuse and neglect in the nation. Is there, however, any empirical evidence that there is a problem to solve with respect to homeschooling community? And are the promotions of more state control over private home education supported by any empirical bases? And here are the considerations. Certain elements must be considered before one answers whether more civil government controls over private activities would reduce the rate of some alleged wrong behavior. First, is trying to stop that behavior before it is executed the role of the civil government? From a biblical perspective, the answer is no. The state is authorized to punish the evildoer and commend the doer of good. This is from 1 Peter 2, 13 through 17. Not to try to stop a person before he or she might do something bad. Also, from a classical liberal freedom perspective, generally the history of the United States, the state is not allowed to put prior restraints on individuals if no crime has been committed. U.S. citizens are presumed innocent until proven guilty. They are not treated as guilty a priori as they go about their lives. Second, there must be evidence that a particular group of individuals is regularly engaged in immoral or legal behavior before the civil government works on plans to control or curtail that group's private behaviors. Finally, if an illegal or immoral problem exists with a certain group of persons, with empirical evidence that it exists, then conversations may be had regarding whether proposed controls, such as statutes, laws, or regulations, might reduce or solve the problem. Next section is research empirical evidence to date. Studies to date suggest that no problem exists. That is, there is no empirical body of evidence that children being in institutional public or private schools makes them less at risk of being abused, neglected, or murdered than homeschooled children. A review of research reveals that the studies that have attempted to include relatively representative samples or be explanatory in nature have found A. Conventional school and homeschool students experience the same rate of maltreatment. B. Homeschooled abused at a lower rate than conventionally schooled. And C, demographics, not school type, explain differences in abuse and neglect. Maltreatment of home-educated at home is not significant. And D, conventional school fatalities are more than homeschool. Further, the few relevant studies done to date do not find that changes in homeschooling law leads to notable changes in abuse or neglect. The studies have found A, no clear evidence of an increase in reported incidents of abuse or other harm in states that relaxed controls in homeschooling. B. Abuse rates declined in the United States as homeschool rates rose. And C. No relationship between degree of state regulation of homeschooling and the abuse, neglect of homeschool students. So here are then some other considerations. And we'll skip to concluding comments. There is no body of research that suggests the rate of child abuse, neglect, and murder or fatalities are any lower amongst public schooled and private schooled children than homeschooled children. There is no body of research that suggests that more civil government control over private homeschooling would reduce any immoral or legal behaviors that are occurring in America. There is no body of research that suggests there's any problem with homeschooling community that requires more state control over the homeschooling community. On the contrary, the extant body of research suggests that there are fewer problems associated with homeschooled children and their families than those involved in institutional public schooling. So once again, I just want to remind you that this is from a research study by Dr. Brian Ray from the National Home Education Research Institute. And I would encourage you to go to his website, nheri.org. And this is him and his team who are putting this research together. It might be important for you to consider also donating to this organization because they're providing this kind of research that helps us combat and respond to the type of accusations that might produce more and unnecessary homeschool regulations. Okay, moving to homeschool conversations. Jared Dodd was one of the speakers at our Thrive conference, and we had a great conversation. He's been doing ministry for the last 20 years. He and his wife started a full-time ministry focused on family and discipleship in 2012. And they currently reside in Texas. They homeschool their 10 children and travel the country speaking on many different subjects, including apologetics, family, homeschooling, discipleship, history, etc. Jared has written several books and has a weekly podcast called The Blessed Family. I hope you'll be encouraged by our conversation. All right, we are here at the Thrive Conference with Jared Dodd, who is one of our speakers. Tell us a little bit about your topics and what you're bringing.
Yeah, so at this convention, I was asked to talk about the 16 essentials or the essentials of homeschooling or of family discipleship, and also the 7 traps that many parents fall into.
Okay.
So exciting topics. I mean, it's so easy. The homeschool movement is growing, which is a huge blessing. At the same time with that, though, we can be blindsided because culture can take a growing movement in different directions, right? So we have homeschoolers that can spell, but they don't know how to work hard. Or they have higher level math, but they don't know how to defend the faith. So the essentials is saying, hey, this is what, like back when this program or this institute was founded, NCHE, I'm sure it was all about being people of character, integrity, work ethic, entrepreneurship, things like that. So helping not abandon the important things like spelling, that's really important, higher level math, but also filling it in with what's essential.
Yeah.
And then 7 traps I'll be speaking about tomorrow, which is the pitfalls. The enemy is the great deceiver. And by definition, when we're deceived, we don't know it, right? Think about that. So all of us are deceived at some point. That's why as parents in God's kingdom, we can humbly, if we will humbly, petition him and learn from each other, we can avoid some pitfalls.
So what's one, pick one of the traps. Give us a
Okay, so
an
probably
idea.
I think the most important trap for homeschool parents to realize, the trap is to homeschool and yet still have the philosophy of state government education. So basically keeping the same philosophy that the state has in education, which is basically just cramming your kid through 12, 13-year gauntlet of information, hoping something sticks, versus the biblical philosophy of education, which begins with the fear of the Lord, begins with a Christian worldview, the goal of which is to teach our children to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to know how to think. And it really sets parents free. It's awesome because parents don't have to teach their kids everything. You just have to teach them how to think and how to learn, and then you set them loose, and they take dominion for the glory of God.
My workshop here is called Raising Lifelong Learners. And those are my first 2 points. I'm like, you're not going to teach them everything anyway.
Yeah.
So teach them to learn. I mean,
That's
they're going to
awesome.
be equipped with skills to
Oh, yeah.
continue in whatever God calls them to, no matter what. And we
That's
can't get
awesome.
hung up on, we got to make sure every little detail. It's not going to happen
Yep.
anyway, right? So how about this? Why would you recommend that someone come to a conference like this?
Oh, so many things. Most people, I'm assuming, have the same story of my wife and I. Our eyes were opened up to the fact that government-run education isn't really biblical, and it's not the best environment. You know, all the issues that just keep growing with public school, and yet we were scared to death. I mean, it was so intimidating to do something that no one if you go back far enough, our forefathers did, but for many generations haven't done. And so to come to a conference like this one, which is a really great conference, by the way, this is my 5th conference speaking at this year. You guys are doing a great job. You come and you can get that inspiration, that information. Many parents won't even dip their toes into the water because they're just scared. They're scared of the unknown. But man, once you build that confidence and, once you jump into it, after a while, you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not scared about it. I've got all the confidence, good biblical confidence. And also meeting. So that's one thing, just getting over that hurdle. Meeting like-minded people that are from your area, which is so, we can't do this alone, right? We need a team. And then curriculum, which can be intimidating because every booth has everything you need, 5,000 resources. But that's what's so awesome about homeschooling, and that's what I tell people. There are principles of homeschooling that are for all of us, but how that plays out, there's 1,000 different ways, and you can make it your own. And it can be laid back, it can be on the couch, it can be at the kitchen table, it can be outsourced. I mean, there's so many different options. So here, you can pick and choose and explore those different resources.
So how can people find your ministry and what you're doing?
So if you go to jareddodd.com, JaredDodd.com, all of our stuff's there. We have a podcast called The Blessed Family. Our mission statement is to reclaim family, church, and state for the glory of God. Those are the 3 institutions given. So we're most passionate about family, we're very passionate about church, and we're very passionate about state, about government. All of those belong to God. They belong to us, therefore. And so Christians need to be involved in all of those institutions. I think I mentioned we have a podcast called The Blessed Family. We've published over 12 books. We also have 4 video series on Right Now Media. We're hosting our first conference in Texas this November, so I drove all the way up here. You have no excuse. You can come down, see us in Texas. We have 10 children, and we're full-time missionaries for homeschoolers.
That's great.
So people can reach out to us anytime. If they go to our website, click the Contact Us, it goes right to my email. If they want to talk books, if they're having a hard time motivating their children, marital issues, we're here for them.
So do you have one last encouragement to parents? Like, what's one of your favorite things to share?
So I would say for homeschool parents, what you're doing is going to multi-generationally set a different trajectory for your family. You're taking your family that's been on a, great, we need to honor our parents and grandparents, but now you're doing something that is going to affect your great-great-grandchildren, and it's powerful. And then just a practical tip. So that's the inspiration I would give. A practical tip is for homeschooling. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes we can try and do too much and burn out the whole family. Keep it simple. Our forefathers, it was reading, writing, arithmetic. That was the education. So like you talked about in your workshop, if we can teach our children how to learn, if we can teach them how to think, if we can disciple them to Christ, if we can keep their hearts. People say, well, I'm not their dad. I'm not their friend. I'm their dad. Well, yeah, but I also want to be my kid's best friend. Yeah. So this last weekend, my eldest son, he's 18. He and I were up at a men's retreat in northern Wisconsin, just getting his heart, keeping his heart, blessing him. Whoever blesses your kids the most will keep their heart. So less is more. It can be simple and powerful.
I love that emphasis on relationship when it comes to discipleship. Without the relationship, like if you don't have their heart, then you can't disciple them. I mean, they're not receiving what's going on. And it was an unbelievable blessing, as you know, when my now a freshman in college, daughter,
Awesome.
told me that I'm her best friend.
Oh,
I'm just like,
that's it, man.
you know what I mean? It's
That's
like
it. That's a
nothing can be
touchdown.
better, you
Oh,
know?
no. That's it.
And so she just moved back home for the summer and we get to spend more time together, but
That's
it's
so
awesome.
man.
Well, Jared, thanks for joining
Yeah.
us and
Thank you.
for being here at the conference.
Oh, my pleasure. God
All
bless
right.
you, man.
Welcome to Homeschool Helps with Amanda. I'm Amanda Wares, Homeschool Helps Director with NCHE. So for these last couple of segments of this season of the Homeschool Show, I thought I would do something I haven't done before in the other seasons. I thought I would share with you all some of my homeschool journey, some of my own story of how I came to homeschool, and some things that I've learned along the way, things like that. So let's start from the very beginning. So when my oldest child, who is now 27, was young, like preschool age, I started thinking about and researching homeschooling. I was very excited about it. I researched a lot. We even did a little bit of like home preschool, and it was super fun. It was great. I enjoyed it. She enjoyed it. It was wonderful. Then it was about time. She was turning 5. And so we started discussing, my husband and I, what are we going to do about school? And I brought up, we had not been married a very, very long time at this point, right? And our communication skills probably were not what they are now, 25 years later. But so I just brought up, well, what about homeschooling? And we had not really discussed it before now. I had just been kind of doing my thing. We had been, staying home, doing preschool, whatever, but we didn't really talk about it, my husband and I, before now. So when I brought it up, he looked at me with this horrified look on his face and said, "Why in the world would I think about that?" Yes. So he was totally against homeschooling at that point in our lives together. And again, with the communication thing, we were not super great at communication yet in our marriage. And I just dropped it. I just dropped it. He told me why he was not happy about the idea of homeschooling, and I really just let it go. And our oldest daughter, ended up going to school for several years. So fast forward a few years, she went to a school, local school here, from kindergarten to 3rd grade, starting even in kindergarten, definitely in 1st grade, and continuing to accelerate on through those last couple of years. There were some issues. She had some issues with attention. She had some issues socially. She had some definite issues with math. And at this school, they were accelerated in math, so it made it even worse. She was also very young. She was the youngest in her class, and that made things worse as well. So by the time she was in 3rd grade, her teacher basically said, you need to have her evaluated for ADHD, for whatever. You need to do this if she's going to stay in the school. So we did. We had her evaluated, and she did indeed have ADHD, which we kind of knew. But so that was official. And at that point, we began to revisit the idea of homeschooling with coming from the mindset of, okay, here is this child. She has ADHD. She's in a classroom with 20 plus other kids, and even the best teacher cannot focus enough on her to give her what she needs. So, what if this was my proposal? What if we take her out of school and work on math, work on focusing attention, work on social skills, all of that. So at that point, my husband reluctantly agreed to let me homeschool for a year. That was the idea. I would homeschool for a year. We would focus on those things and then put her back. That was the goal. So that is where it all started 20 years ago now. I cannot believe it's been that long. And when I tell you that the change in all of us, from then till now, in my husband, his attitude towards homeschooling in general, towards homeschooling our kids specifically, all of that has changed like 180. It is completely, completely different. Homeschooling very literally has changed our lives for the better. So we started homeschooling. I was very nervous, but I had researched. I am a Googler. I'm a researchaholic. And so I researched a lot. I chose a curriculum and we jumped in. And it went really well. I mean, there were parts of it that were hard. If you've ever heard one of my getting started with homeschooling workshops, you'll know that that first year was very difficult in a lot of ways. My daughter hated and still hates change. And even good change is not good in her world. And so that was a tough year. Also, I felt like I had something to prove to my husband, who was not really on board with homeschooling. So it was tough. But by the end of the year, there had been such significant growth in my daughter, in our then 4.5-year-old son, who was 4.5, wild, but brilliant. He wanted to learn all the things. So I just kind of he joined in. We did school with him too. And by the end of that year, it really was so obvious, the growth and the benefit to all of us as a family, that homeschooling had helped all the things, that my husband then was like, oh, well, maybe we should homeschool another year. And then he agreed to come to the homeschool conference with me that May. And let me tell you guys, I will tell you in the next video, but that experience changed his mind, his heart, and it changed our homeschooling life experience together 100%. So I hope this has been helpful, enjoyable, encouraging, and I'll do one more video here next time.
All right, thanks so much for joining us again this week. We appreciate your time and attention. We'd love to hear from you about topics or questions that you may have you'd like us to address. You can email us at thehomeschoolshow@nche.com. You can find out about other ways to listen and how to subscribe at nche.com/thehomeschoolshow. Please share this with your family and friends if you think it will be helpful to them. And until next week, continue to homeschool with confidence and joy.